it's not that important doing the actual analysis, because if you're a smart data scientist, like most people can figure out how to do some sort of statistical model or analysis. But the more important portion of it is being able to translate those findings to the rest of the world, because data is sort of like a language where it's great that if you meet another data scientist that can kind of speak the same language, but more often than not, the average person has no idea what a p-value, or they don't care about R squared numbers, or it's all jargon to them.
Welcome to the How to Scale Commercial Real Estate Show. Whether you are an active or passive investor, we'll teach you how to scale your real estate investing business into something big.
Jason Baik is an ex-data scientist turned full-time real estate investor. He quit a six-figure day job when he had zero. That's right. Listen, 0 units. And in the last less than 2 years, he scaled over 320 units. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sam, for having me. Great to be here.
Hey, man, the pleasure's mine. There are 3 questions I ask every guest who comes on the show in 90 seconds or less. Can you tell me, where did you start? Where are you now? And how did you get there?
Yeah. So again, started off in corporate America, spent a decade there climbing the rungs of that corporate ladder. But I always knew that working for someone else wasn't for me. So kind of like your intro mentioned, I took a leap of faith, took a chance on myself for the first time in my life, went cold turkey, had absolutely no idea what a door was in comparison to a soffit, or barely knew what hardwood floors meant. So yeah, struggled through a few years of kind of ramping up in real estate, but now have a number of units, a few properties underneath my belt, working with my business partner out of Cincinnati, Ohio, and we're still actively looking in multifamily. And I'd say I actually got there by doubling down on a specific skill set. I am a former data scientist, and so I'm pretty good with numbers. And even though the world of multifamily doesn't necessarily reward pure underwriters all that much, I knew that that's kind of my only value add to people that had tons of experience. So kind of by refining my ability to analyze deals, I was able to make great partnerships and kind of eventually end up with the teams that I am today.
That's awesome. What is a data scientist?
Great question. So I helped Fortune 500 companies take all of their data based on their advertising, their customers, their finances, and kind of give them business direction. But it has to be based off of sort of risk mitigation, and it has to be based on real world facts. So data scientist is a fancy word for like kind of like a general analyst. Like you take a bunch of numbers, synthesize it, and kind of tell your client how to do better.
Got it. And so you did that for a decade and you said, hey, that's enough. I want to do something else. I'm going to get into real estate. And you just quit and said, all right, I'm going to figure this out.
Yeah, exactly. There's actually, I have a funny story in that the day that I quit, my worst fear came to light, where my boss at the time asked me, oh, like, I hear you're going to real estate. How many houses do you own? And I ended up lying to her, because I was so embarrassed by the fact that I had absolutely no experience. And most people don't take that level of risk. So I'm like, oh yeah, I have a few houses, just a few lying around here and there. But yeah, in truth, I had absolutely nothing.
Well, that's courageous of you to at least come clean at this point, where it's like, oh, that's yeah.
It's only in hindsight that I can tell that story.
Hey man, it's all right. It gives a little color to probably the fear and or the just intimidating circumstances. Like, hey, I'm quitting my job. I'm terrified here in my own right that I'm going to go out and mess this up, and yet I know this is what I have to do. So that's
definitely a lot of sleepless nights, a lot of just a lot of stress is the best way I can put it. But I'm glad that at least part of that is behind me.
Well, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the hard times that build the man, but certainly when those loosen up or lessen, it's always grateful when it gets a little bit easier. Tell me this. I mean, because you have an interesting entrance into real estate, what is one, or as many as you like, number of things that you would do differently if you could go back and redo it, what would you tell yourself getting into this? You know, that the day you quit that job, what would you go back and say, hey, Jason, here's what I would recommend?
That's a good question. I'm not the type of person to necessarily regret anything, so I
Sure.
actually kind of enjoy my journey. I'm the type of person, like, if I didn't make all those mistakes, if I didn't kind of have those sleepless nights, I feel like I wouldn't be where I am today. But the way that I went about it is definitely not optimal. I actually started off in single family homes, because, again, that fear, they're smaller. Like, I can kind of take them down myself. Like, I can stabilize it myself. So if I were to actually go back in time, I'd actually tell myself to not think so small, even from the get go, and start off in bigger commercial multifamily, because I always knew that's where I wanted to end up, even back then. But I was just hesitant because, I mean, quitting my day job was a big step. I figured I could hedge as much as possible by starting in my single family homes. But yeah, I mean, it would have been great to be even farther along had I, saved that time not being in single family homes.
Right. What are you investing in now?
Mostly multifamily, because we've got systems set up to kind of give us the deal flow and kind of close them. But we are also looking at non-residential commercial, so strip malls, mixed use retail, medical offices.
Up to this point, it's been all multifamily, or is the portfolio already kind of a blend of other asset classes?
A little bit of a blend of asset classes, but I'd say like 90% multifamily.
Very cool. And you're buying, where in the country are you finding opportunity? Because I know you live in Jersey.
Yes, our core market is out of Ohio,
Hmm,
so Cincinnati specifically, but we will stretch into nicer areas of Dayton and then into Columbus as well. Yeah, Ohio is those three cities are kind of odd in that they're only about 45 minutes from each other.
right.
And so, yeah, in total, it's maybe like 5 to 6 million people in that kind of MSA.
Right, right. You add Cincinnati to Dayton to
Mhm.
Columbus. Yeah. I don't is it that Dayton and Cincinnati are that close, huh?
Sorry, it's Dayton. Oh, sorry, Dayton and Cincinnati is close, and then Dayton and Columbus is close.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay. That's really cool. How did you get your first asset done? Well, actually, before we even get to that, tell
Mhm.
me when you decided, like, when did you know that going bigger was the right thing to do?
As soon as I stabilized my few single family homes that I owned, I knew that it was way too much work for not enough return. And again, like, I had known even from the start that I was going to move to multifamily. I think when I first started, I was expecting that, like, let me pick up like 20 single family homes, like, slowly, and then eventually switch over. But after I picked up seven, I decided to make that jump a little sooner because I was just sick of single families.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. What did you do? Or if you don't want to answer that question, what would you recommend someone does that wants to transition into bigger assets?
That's a great question. I definitely had a hard time because single family homes, even the way that you analyze single family homes is a little more straightforward than multifamily. And multifamily requires a much bigger team. Again, I took down single family homes on my own. Like, I found a contractor,
Right.
paid with my own money, right? Very, very straightforward. But when I wanted to make the change using the same strategy that I found success in with single family, I realized that very quickly that it wasn't going to work. Like, I could barely buy a 10 unit apartment on my own. So there was no way I was going to be able to recycle that and scale. In hindsight, the biggest tactic that helped me get into multifam was actually going to in-person events, just because meeting people in person, there's a level of camaraderie that I feel like you just can't get over Zoom. And being able to meet more people and ask them if they had any connections that I could talk to helped kind of scale my network pretty efficiently.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love in-person events. That's certainly you don't know. I always say that an in-person event, like the value of those lies probably not on what's happening in the stage, but rather what's happening in the hallway.
Exactly. Oh,
It's like
100%. And I learned after, I think, like, my third or fourth multi-family event, like, that fourth one, I ended up not even staying in the main room where they taught the education part,
right.
because I didn't. Yeah, at that point, like, I mean, it's all kind of the same thing. Like, once you go to one multifamily event, like, they'll kind of teach you the same things as other ones. But exactly what you said, I soon realized that all the sort of the gold was out in the hallway. So no, I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's something I don't and I'm sorry for everybody that pays money to go be on stage and do all that, because I've done that certainly myself, but it if I go to an event, it's so I can stand in the hallway and talk to people and
Yeah, yeah.
build those relationships. That's really cool. One of the things as a data scientist that you and I talked about before we hit record here was that you're working on an underwriting course. What I guess when you started figuring out the multifamily business and you started, like you said, bringing some of your skill sets to the table on the data side of things, what were some pieces of the puzzle you feel like that were missing, maybe in the models or in the approach or any of, and again, I'm talking a little bit out of my league because I'm not a data scientist, that you felt like was missing that you are putting together in this course?
Yeah, another great question. So as a data scientist, throughout most of my career, I learned that it's not that important doing the actual analysis, because if you're a smart data scientist, like most people can figure out how to do some sort of statistical model or analysis. But the more important portion of it is being able to translate those findings to the rest of the world, because data is sort of like a language where it's great that if you meet another data scientist that can kind of speak the same language, but more often than not, the average person has no idea what a p-value, or they don't care about R squared numbers, or it's all jargon to them.
Right.
And so I learned that even with these underwriting courses too, it's sort of similar where they all kind of focus on just the Excel, which is again super important, but it's dense. Even for me, who I'm in Excel every day, just going through each individual tab, learning how to plug in numbers doesn't really give me the bigger picture. Doesn't really explain how I move forward from here. So um, I think my thinking in building my own underwriting course was to try to bridge that gap, make a process that is beyond just a spreadsheet and make it applicable to real life people who want to be underwriters or kind of grow their underwriting skills. So yeah, it's funny that my experience as a data scientist has actually led me to want to create a course that is less technical.
That yeah, absolutely. That is not that is not the answer I expected. So thank you for that. Yeah, I would have expected you to like have regression analysis and all sorts of, pages added into your models that, and you're going,
Yeah,
"No,
yeah.
we're going to make this much easier." How have you distilled it down such to make it more simple? Like, what are we overcomplicating that you say, man, this just needs to be far easier?
So there's definitely, again, as a data scientist, there's only so much I can simplify data. There's still a model that I provide that you have to, like, anecdotally, I've met people that tell me they can underwrite on like a napkin or like a chalkboard, and
Right.
those are the people that I obviously, like, I disagree with strongly. Like, you still have to be proficient with data, but the way that I structure is that there's both an art and a science to underwriting, and most people focus just on the science, just the Excel spreadsheet. But the art portion kind of comes in just being able to like talk to local investors, talking to local property managers, even basic online research, kind of driving around on Google Maps, or using a ton of free online resources to look up household income before you determine if it's even worth underwriting. And this all stems from sort of my own personal experiences. Like, again, I've talked to um, maybe dozens of other underwriters at this point, and I've run into plenty of situations where I would meet a fellow underwriter that has spent 2 hours plugging numbers into an Excel, and then they would ask me for some feedback because we've got a very good like working relationship. And I would say, this is a terrible area. Like, why would you even invest here? And their response would be like, oh, I didn't even realize. I didn't check where the address was. So a lot of what I feel like makes underwriting more efficient and more interesting is by building a process that makes sure that you are focusing on sort of your specific criteria and doing some easy steps before you go into the complex Excel modeling that may take hours.
What are some of those easy steps maybe that you took before having that conversation with your colleague when you're like, have you looked at the area? What were some of those steps?
Yeah, something as simple as like checking if it's in a flood zone, or literally just I typically start off by driving around on Google Maps for like half an hour, just to get a feel for the area. Now, obviously, because we've been in Cincinnati for a while, if I find a deal in Cincinnati, I typically don't do that anymore. But if I'm trying to partner with someone else in a new region, getting an understanding of the market that I'm dealing with, I feel like uncovers a ton of value that not a lot of people devote that time for. Because I know for a fact that I don't invest in war zones, right? I know there's a lot of great people with really smart strategies around like opportunity zones or Section 8, but that's just not our strategy. And so if I find a property or someone gives me a deal and I'm driving around and I realize that most of these stores around our property are pawn shops and Dollar Trees, and there's absolutely no sign of anything remotely C or B class, then I know that I'm in the wrong area. And I can kind of complete that underwriting, for the lack of a better word, without even opening up an Excel spreadsheet. So there's a lot of these. Again, this is also a result of dozens and dozens of times that I've personally also opened up Excel as my first step. And it's only after I kind of was honest with myself, gave myself some feedback afterwards, I was able to refine a process that makes my life a whole lot easier today.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I like that. Drive Google Maps for 30 minutes because that's it. It's like if it just doesn't fit your the art portion of of how you put it, like because there is certain amounts of data can tell you one thing, like, oh, hey, we can bring rents up, we can do XYZ, but it doesn't tell you kind of what the conditions of the area is in.
Exactly.
Just what the overall feel of the place is. So on that same token, though, there are assets out there that may not be the prettiest asset in the world that can produce great income. Do you guys have anything like that in your portfolio right now, where maybe you went, hey, this isn't the prettiest project, but the numbers just make a heck of a lot of sense?
Oh yeah, we've taken on like full gut jobs that require demolition to the studs.
Wow.
So I mean, we love those projects because they're just a different, I guess, like tool in your tool belt. They're usually high velocity. Like you're not gonna make any cash flow for like a year or two, but then you refi, you get all your money back, and you kind of sit on infinite cash flow, even if it's very small amount of cash flow because you refi so much out. So definitely something that we love to take a look at. If anything, we probably do more of those than like stabilized assets because stabilized assets. If you're a big syndicator and you can take down like a 300 unit, that's pretty stabilized. That's great, but there's not much meat on the bones for smaller assets for people like us that are doing this full time.
Right, absolutely. But look at your journey thus far. You've gone from a data scientist to now acquiring assets, a larger multifamily assets. What is something you feel like you've done really well that other people should emulate?
Something that I've done really well. That's a good question. I think niching down has actually been very beneficial to me. I have a number of sort of newer investors that reach out because they want help, which I love. I love to try and give back to people that are from a similar background, right? Like a corporate America background or other data scientists or other analysts. But whenever I ask them what they do, their answer is always, "Oh, I can do anything." And I think saying that you're a jack of all trades is sort of the biggest deterrent for anyone with even a little bit of experience to help you out, because I don't know what that means. If you think that you can raise capital and also underwrite and also find deals and also asset manage, I think you're not respecting each individual role enough, or you don't know enough about each role to be able to say that. And also, again, even if I can't use you, if I'm trying to put you with other people that are sort of in your similar level of investing knowledge, if you just tell me that you can do everything, I don't really know how to put a team together for you either.
Right.
So I've always said my entire career that I'm an underwriter. I know it's not the flashiest of roles. Like underwriters barely get any equity for purely underwriting, but I've been able to get my foot in the door with business partners and key principals because they know exactly what I do. I underwrite, I'm good with spreadsheets. I can do other things. And obviously that's something that you have to do in real estate. You have to put on many hats, but you should never say it out loud. You should always say, I'm a specific person. I can raise a good amount of capital. I can find deals. I can underwrite. I can do due diligence, whatever. I can manage contractors because that that really helps people kind of know where you slot into a team. And I think it's a lot easier to find a team that way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny you say that. It was I used to be involved in the trades, and we owned a flooring company. So I owned a flooring company until I was 30. When guys would come in for an interview or come in to tell me what they did, and it's like, hey, you know, because we had, you know, we did all flooring service types. We did residential, we did commercial, we did it was a great business. But when installers would come in and they'd say, hey man, you know, tell me about you. What do you do? And they'd say, man, I can install everything. I put my country accent on. I'm not sure why I did that, but I did. And I said, man, I can install everything. And I just immediately would write down, it's like, you know, do not hire, whatever. It's like, because you just told me that you don't specialize in anything.
Right.
So those were the guys I thank for coming in, and I just send them on their way. But the guy that came in and said, man, I only install tile. That's all I do. Mm-hmm. I don't do carpet. I don't do hardwood. I don't do any, I'm a tile installer. And I only do commercial projects. Okay, great, done. Like you're an expert. You're a specialist in your field, and that's I haven't heard anybody else say that, but I really like the way you put that, where it's like define who you are on the team. And if you don't know it, what would you say to somebody maybe that's newer in the space that's trying to figure it out? How do they figure out what role that they could or should play? You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say just try to leverage what you know about yourself, or maybe whatever career you're in currently. Again, I was a data scientist. Really easy for me to underwrite. Love numbers. It's a kind of an easier transition. If you're in sales and you talk to people all the time, maybe reaching out to doctors and lawyers to see if they want to invest. That's your role, right? Or maybe if you are in marketing or you're a graphic designer, maybe you're really good at also talking to investors or making mailers. So I'd say not going in blind and trying to just have a little bit of kind of like EQ. Be honest with yourself. If you really don't like talking to people, you probably shouldn't be talking to people. If you really don't like numbers, then don't work with numbers. But I feel like because multifamily takes such a large team, that there's always something that I feel like your skills or your preferences can translate to.
Right. No, that's really cool. Absolutely cool. Jason, thank you for taking the time to come on the show today and share with us your journey thus far. I think it's absolutely awesome, the courage it takes to just walk out on your job and say, hey man, I'm going long in real estate and I'm going to figure it out one way or another. It's Cortez's burning of the ships, right? It's
It's not something that I would necessarily recommend to anyone else, but I just know how I function. So
absolutely.
Fortunately for it.
For better or for worse, you know yourself well enough to say this is the way it's got to go. So very cool. I love everything you've shared with us today. Thanks for taking the time to do that. If our listeners want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, and I know it's not quite live yet, but when it comes time for your underwriting course to come out, tell me all of the ways that we may get a hold of you if we want to.
Easiest way is to actually visit our website, www.compoundingcapitalgroup.com. Spelled exactly how it sounds. We are actually doing a refresh of our website as well, so it will look a little cooler in a few weeks. But there's an opportunity to join our mailing list, and that's really how we communicate best with anyone that's interested in staying in touch or getting involved with us.
Fantastic. So compoundingcapital.com. We'll make sure we include that there in the show notes. Jason, thank you again for coming on the show today. Certainly appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Sam.